As Becky said, I'm the granddaughter of one of the owners of the Dayton Theater. A lot of people don't realize we had a theater downtown. Usually when I say something about a theater, somebody will say, oh, I remember it was up at Richland Park. No, this one was right in town. My grandparents moved from McMinnville to Dayton probably around 1942, 43. I don't know who owned the theater before they had it, but my grandfather's cousin, Calvin Woodley, owned several theaters over around McMinnville in that area. And he actually bought the Dayton Theater and asked my grandfather to move here to run it, which he and my grandmother did. My mother was starting her freshman year of high school that year. They moved here. They lived downtown. George talked about Airline Service Station. They actually lived in a house right behind Airline Service Station until they built the house out on the mountain. Now, why they chose the mountain, I don't know, but that's another story. But anyway, Granddaddy took over the theater. He managed it for a couple of years for Cowan, and then he and Cowan went into business together. And Granddaddy eventually, after that, bought the Dayton Theater from Cowan, and he actually bought the Dayton Drive-In, if you remember the Drive-In. So at one time, my grandfather owned the theater and the drive-in. And I tell the story that Grandmother and Granddaddy would operate the theater at night. Mother worked at Robson's Manufacturing during the day. She would come home, feed me, get me ready for bed. We'd get in the car. She would go to the drive-in and sell tickets at the drive-in. So the drive-in was my playground. That's where I ran the whole yard. By the time it was my bedtime, I'd be dirty again. But anyway, she would sell tickets till the drive-in closed. I don't know how they worked like they did back then, but they did. They worked many, many hours. Mother eventually left Robson's and went to beauty school when I was in the 3rd grade and became a hairdresser. But Granddaddy was quite well known around town for being everybody was afraid of my grandfather. Little did they know he couldn't kill a fly, and he was so tender-hearted. But he was very, very strict at the theater, and he kept it in line. Dean actually found a picture of it. I did not have a picture of the theater, but he found this and gave it to me. There is a store beside there. None of us have been able to figure out what that store was. I don't remember a store being there. All I remember is there were a parking lot being there. But I've asked Ann, we've all tried to figure out what that was, but evidently it was torn down by the time Granddaddy had the theater. This is some of you may remember them. This is my grandparents, Mr. and Miss Woodley. They were quite a case. But he did a lot of work for the theater. One of the things that I was always impressed with is in the summertime he would move the popcorn machine outside of the theater, and he would start popping the popcorn before it was time for the theater to open. Well, can you imagine the smell? So by the time the theater opened, he had a line of people waiting to get in there. You could buy a bag of popcorn. The bag was about this high for a nickel. You could get a Coca-Cola, which you got it in the bottle for a nickel. You know, you can't do that today. You cannot get in the theater for that. But one of the funniest stories I remember, my grandmother was always meticulously dressed. I don't care what she was doing. She had her earbuds on, as she called them. She always had a dress on. She was always very, very well dressed. She was sitting up in the window of the theater one night. She also had false teeth. She never would let anybody see her without her false teeth. But she was sitting in the ticket window one night selling tickets. And she said, for some unknown reason, these two boys walked up, they handed her a $20 bill, and when she went to count the change back, her false teeth fell out into her lap. She said she grabbed them as fast as she could and crammed them back in her mouth, and she said, the two boys turned purple to try to keep from laughing. The minute they got inside the double doors of the lobby, they fell in the floor laughing. She could hear them all the way outside. But I remember that to this day. She was so embarrassed because her teeth fell out. But that's about all I can tell you about the theater. It was my playground. I loved it. Granddaddy was one of the people, one of the businessmen that got the Dayton on Parade tapes. There was a filmmaker that would come through town every so many years. And the businessmen would get together and have him film all about Dayton. And Granddaddy would show the film then at the theater. And I've actually got one here. Dean has been great about putting it on the thumb drive for me finally. But this is one of the original reels. I think there's a couple more, I think, Dean, that we've discovered. I'm not sure. But this one is from 1941, this one. But this is the actual reel, one of the reels that he had done. I've held on to it all these years. I've promised it to Dean if I ever give it away. So. But yeah, it was, he kept the theater. What did we decide when it closed? Where is that?
Oh.
Step down a minute.
What was it? Ann, 58, 59?
Yeah, something like that. I think we decided it finally closed. He sold the drive-in. He had these two boys, the Aiken boys, that worked for him at the theater. When he got ready, he decided the theater and the drive-in was too much for him and grandmother. So he decided to sell the drive-in, and he sold it to the Aiken boys. And they ran it for many, many years up there. But he decided to sell, people started getting their TV sets, and they just quit coming to the theater. And so business just dropped off, and he decided to close it. And I think we decided 58, 59, something like that. Thanks to Brenda Marler. She remembers everything. So.
Yeah, I said Ann, I meant Brenda Marler.
Yeah.
Also probably nobody knows, but if you remember Bill Matherly, who ran the theater in Richland Park, he worked for Mr. Woodley on Saturdays downtown.
Yeah.
And that's how he got interested in the movie theater business. That's how he started pursuing it in 73.
Yeah. And very quickly, my other grandfather, Luther Welch, he was, of course, road supervisor for many, many years, but he had Welch's Tourist Court, another one of my playgrounds. But it had a wonderful restaurant in it, which my Granny Welch did the cooking, and it was marvelous. I can remember many, many meals up there. But he mainly was road supervisor for many, many years here. He also worked at Airline Service Station when he was very young for a while too. So. And my dad, of course, was a football player, and he was the first all-state player that Ray County, Ray Central had. I won't make that mistake. Everybody gets the high schools mixed up. He was the first all-state player that Ray Central had, and went on to actually, he did play for the Los Angeles Rams for a short period of time, but he got hurt, so they dropped him. So other than that, but that's all I have on the thing. I've got pictures if anybody likes to see them. You're welcome to look at them.
And since Becky is too humble to mention this, I will. She was Miss Dayton, 19, help me out here, 64, 65?
64, yeah.
64, 65. Miss Dayton.
Yeah. Many, many years ago. Oh, and one other thing I want to say, and I'll embarrass them, I'm so proud to have my two grandsons here. They are our shining light. George and I look, that's our life back there, those two. And our sweet little Katie, we've adopted her into the family. She's part of us now, so you've got to talk to my grandsons. I'm so proud of them. All right, Krista kind of gets left out of the picture now, so. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, George and Becky. There's something very special listening very special about it, something very fascinating about it. So we appreciate you all coming in and talking about your families today. All of us have those rich, interesting stories, and it's great to be able to have those recorded now with Dean's camera. And we thank you so much for coming out. All of you, if you all have any interest in joining this society, just come to Sarah Jane or I or Tom or Pat, one of us, and we'd love to have you, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.